We're here with baller pilot Deanna Wallace in the hangar. Welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Christy Wong. Today's episode is brought to you by Wingfield Aviation. Today, I am here with baller pilot Deanna Wallace, and she's baller for a lot of reasons, but we're going to get into that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
All right.
It's sweaty hands.
That's okay. That tends to happen up here.
Cameras.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, you've been on the show a couple of times before. We've talked about ferrying, and whatnot, and we are going to talk about that a little bit, but you're here today because I want to talk to you, get to know you a little bit better. You've got some fascinating stories.
Oh, thanks.
So let's just talk about how you got into aviation, first of all.
Okay. Well, growing up, my mom was a private pilot, multi-rated, non-instrument rated, and just used to drag us all over the country in an aircraft we owned. Not a Warrior, a Seneca, but right, but yeah. So I kind of grew up around it. She died when I was 15, but. Aviation just stuck with me. So when I turned 17, I went out to the local airport between my junior and senior year in high school and started flying lessons, and rest is history. It's the only thing I wanted to do. It's the only thing I know how to do. and so here we are.
Okay, so you are a commercial pilot, and you're a flight instructor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I've been instructing for 20 years now.
Okay, stop, hold back, rewind.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but that doesn't seem possible.
Yeah, well, I turned 40 this year.
Oh,
I got my
gosh.
license at 17. So
Okay, well, I would have never guessed that, so
Yeah.
there's that.
I just told it to the world, don't date this video.
All right, so what is your primary job, I guess, within aviation now?
It's as an instructor and a pilot. I work for KC Aviation, so I fly a couple managed King Airs for local owners there in that area, in the East Texas area, and I help Joe Casey with PA 46 instruction, initial and recurrent training, insurance approved training in the PA 46 world.
How do you like that airplane?
I love it.
Okay.
All of them.
That's my
Great.
lotto plane, so that's why I asked.
Excellent.
And I'll come to you when I need the instruction.
Perfect.
After I win the lotto, though.
I
have
told
to
Steve
do
to
that.
go shake out the couch cushions and start drumming up the money for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so how did you get into ferry piloting?
Through Joe Casey, actually. I went to work for him a couple years ago, and, every so often he likes to sit down with all his employees and say, okay, where do you want to be? Where is this on your priority list? And, I don't want to be doing this that he does, and I do want to be doing this, which is mostly just flying. And he had been taking ferry flights for quite a while, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. And he said, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where does that fall? Somewhere around a 20.
Okay.
And so he made one trip happen. We took a plane over to India from the U.S. together, and I was completely hooked. I think he kind of thought I'd go through it, and at the end of it be like, yeah, it's that was work.
Yeah.
but no, I loved it, and so I did 5 trips, international trips, since last July.
Wow.
And it's been a lot of fun. I still love it.
Okay, you've got some pretty cool stories because obviously you fly in different airspaces around the world and you fly with different cultures and whatnot. I mean, a lot of times you're flying through the airspace, and that in itself has its own challenges. I want to hear some stories.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well, it's interesting the way these trips go. On the very first one, the number one rule was, stay flexible. Everything changes all the time. And so I'd made I'd made one trip across with Joe, and someone called needing a King Air 200 to go to France, and Joe couldn't do it. And he said, Deanna can. I mean, been over
Yeah.
there once.
Right.
But I was with a lady who was very knowledgeable in the route, who had done this lots and lots of times. And so, I flew the plane, but she helped manage the logistics and stuff. And then came back across on another flight with Joe from Austria. And then on number 4, he's like, "You've got this. Go get this King Air in India and bring it back." And so I did that in December, and everything went pretty smoothly. I mean, it was 5 days from India back across, and lovely weather and no maintenance issues. I mean, everything went perfect. And so when another one came up in January, I'm like, oh yeah, I've got this. Oh my goodness.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, something caught up to me on that trip. It started at the airport here in Dallas. So when we make these oceanic crossings, we have to carry life rafts or some sort of flotation device.
Right.
And we also carry immersion suits for the North Atlantic routes where the water's much colder. And I got to India and found out the TSA had removed my life raft from, yes. So normally they're inflated with compressed gas cartridges, and normally they'll just remove those cartridges if we leave them in. Sometimes they leave them, but this time they just took the whole raft out and, handed it over to the airline, and here I was in India without a raft. So we had to solve that problem.
Stay flexible.
Stay
Yeah.
flexible.
Okay.
Stay flexible. Find a raft. So that one started out, I got the plane moved from southern India to northern India and got up there, and it was one of the smaller King Airs. It was a 90, so not very long, not a huge range, about 900 miles, with relatively calm winds.
And you're by yourself, by the way, right?
I'm by myself.
Okay.
Yes. And get to northern India, and my next stop is over to Oman. Well, the winds were just howling out of the west. I mean, we had 80, 90 knot winds aloft. You had to stay high for the fuel burn. You couldn't stay low for the lower winds. And then we were getting some horror. And when I say I had handlers helping me along the route with the overflight permits and the flight planning and all of that. We just couldn't find a great way to do it, but they were giving us terrible routing way up into Pakistan and then across the coastline and then back across the Gulf of Oman and just stretching out this already long leg. And, we decided, we waited it out a day, decided on the next day, I think we can do this. As soon as I turned west into Pakistan's territory, I looked at my fuel burn and my ground speed and thought, I am never going to make it the 400 miles over the Gulf of Oman. And so I had to request a diversion to Karachi, Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
And it was interesting. They weren't expecting me. We had no permits in place to land there. So they had lots of questions about souls on board. Which is interesting. They had me repeat that 3 different times. There's one person on board. Well, how many in addition to crew? No one person on board. And the reason being the King Air, all models are two pilot aircraft in the Middle East and through that region. And so for just one crew member to be flying, it was unusual for them anyway. We landed, had a mostly uneventful fuel stop, and took off for the UAE shortly thereafter.
So I just have to ask this, just because.
Yes.
Did they give you any issues because you are a female?
No, they didn't.
Awesome. Okay.
And I was expecting them from my first trip through the Middle East. Again, it was with Joe. I was expecting some issues because on those stops they always deferred to him.
Right.
If I said something, they'd look to him for confirmation and so it was, I was worried. But my first trip through on my own back in December, everyone was great. They were, gracious and courteous, and I had no problems at all traveling through the Middle East.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did wear a headscarf.
Okay.
Not their formal garb, but I did cover my hair just to be respectful of their customs, going through both Pakistan and Saudi Arabia for my fuel stops. But those were the only places that I took any additional measures outside of normal.
Okay. Did you have any like fun, other than just the?
Well, so the other interesting thing about this particular trip was, this was, I arrived in India to get this plane approximately 2 days after the U.S. bombed Soleimani in Iraq. And so, mentally I'm counting in my head, okay, they said 3 days of mourning and then death to the U.S. and here I am trucking through in a U.S. registered aircraft. So it was interesting. I was delayed the day in India. I got to the UAE, and the morning I was to leave there, they started closing down all the airspace through there for U.S. registered aircraft. And so I was probably one of the last registered aircraft to make it out of the region. They sent me up the middle of the Persian Gulf and over into Saudi, and it was.
You got lucky.
I got lucky. One more day, I would have been stuck there. Yeah, or the aircraft would have been stuck there.
Right. How was air traffic control during that trip?
Air traffic control is great. Really, you always have to be aware of what's going on and what they're requesting you to do. And a lot of the airspace through the different countries, while mostly similar and most people conform to ICAO standards, there are small differences. So I was always very careful to follow ATC instructions just to a T, while also watching my own course and charting to make sure it didn't look like I was busting anything I shouldn't be.
Right.
Dialects, English is the official language, but dialects can make English not sound quite so much like our English sometimes.
Right.
But again, that gets easier with use. So the more you go through and listen to it, the easier it is. You kind of start to know what to expect and start picking up on those little dialect differences, and it gets easier.
How long did that trip take you?
This one took in the 90, a little over 60 flight hours, which...
Wow, that'll help you build your time, huh?
Right, it will. I did that in 6 days.
Wow, that's actually impressive.
It's a lot of flying. It's get up in the morning and go, and you stop for fuel, and you stop in the evening just long enough to maybe grab a bite to eat, go to bed, and get up the next day and start it all over.
Wow.
Yeah, so this one had one extra overnight in Egypt than a previous one had. We stopped in Italy, went through Belgium, Ireland, picked up a ton of ice out of Ireland. The North Atlantic was busy weather-wise. Got a good bit of ice coming out of Ireland. Had 55-knot surface winds in Iceland. The morning I was to depart, the fuelers, they actually put a stop to me taking off because they refused to climb up the ladder and fuel me in those winds. And so
I kind of don't blame them.
I asked them, I said, okay, what does it have to get down to? And they said, below 50. I'm like, okay, 49, 55. I mean, either way, you're up on a ladder in howling winds. But as soon as it dropped below 50, they got me fueled and took off out of there. There was an extreme low pressure over the area. When I was coming across the night before from Ireland, it's a C90, so I wasn't very high. I was 26,000 feet. Thunderstorms underneath me, the tops of them, and that's unusual. So I got quite the lightning show from the top, and you never see that from the top in a C90.
Right.
But just the way the atmosphere is there and the low pressure contributed to those conditions. But yeah, it was interesting. Got to Greenland the following day. It was negative 30 degrees Celsius on the ground. It took 2 hours to refuel the aircraft. The gas cap fell apart. And yeah, I had to put it back together with a pair of pliers and, try to keep my fingers intact in negative 30 degrees during the process.
I would have been like, nope, I'm done. We're going to wait till April.
Yeah, right. That's how I felt. And I'll tell you, that airplane did not like sitting at negative 30 degrees for 2 hours either. I climbed back into the cockpit and my breath was freezing into ice crystals on the glass, and I couldn't get the engine started fast enough. I got them started, and the avionics just were so slow to fire up. Anything digital in there took forever to warm back up. So my primary...
Just 2 hours.
Just 2 hours, yeah. My primary altimeter and altitude pre-select and the GPS, none of it really wanted to warm up quickly there.
Wow.
So yeah, and then get over to Goose Bay, Canada, which is our traditional stopping point. Get up the next morning to a flat tire. It was just...
So this trip was just like
those. I tell you, I had political tensions. I had, TSA removing equipment. I had flat tires and broken gas caps. I was freezing. And anyone who knows me knows I live in Texas for a reason. We live in Texas. That's right. Negative 30.
That doesn't even register in my brain.
No.
When it gets down to 30, I'm like 30 Fahrenheit, I'm like, I'm out.
Exactly.
Negative 30 Celsius.
So for 3 days, I had a high of negative 6 degrees Celsius and the low of just under negative 30.
Well, other than that, it sounds fascinating.
Oh, fabulous trip, fabulous trip. Just lots of stuff happening. You have to just kind of adapt and overcome and keep the plane moving.
Yeah. Okay, so what's next?
Oh gosh. Well, I think I'm on the chart for taking a PA-46 across to Switzerland. I'm
Cool.
really excited about that one. And then Joe and I will do we'll arm wrestle or rock, paper, scissors or something for a King Air flight to Tunisia coming up.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got some fun stuff coming up, and really excited about continuing the ferry.
So you have no plans on leaving ferrying. This is it.
I don't. I love it. I'm here to stay.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. Well, there you have it. Baller pilot Deanna Wallace. You've learned a lot today about ferrying. If you like what you see, like, subscribe, share. We do appreciate it. And we'll see you next time in the hangar.